some are still saying the idea of members of the Electoral College denying Mr. Trump the presidency is a reality, and they ought to. A group of celebrities in Los Angeles is trying their hardest to get the electors to do that. Watch.
You and just 36 other conscientious Republican electors can make a difference
by voting your conscience on December 19th.
And thereby shaping the future of our nation.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
As you know, the Constitution gives electors the right to vote for any eligible person.
Any eligible person, no matter which party they belong to.
But it should certainly be someone you consider especially competent.
Especially competent to serve as President of the United States of America.
Well, Larry Lessig is a Harvard constitutional law professor who made a brief run for the 2016 Democratic presidential nomination. And he says 20 Republican electors will not and should not vote for Trump. He joins us now from Reykjavik, Iceland. Mr. Lessig, thanks a lot for coming on. So you wrote a long and I thought interesting and smart piece. Oh, thank you. There's a bit of a delay. You wrote the smart piece, I thought, in the Daily Beast, explaining why this is constitutionally viable and why you think it's a good idea. And some of it made sense. Here's one part that didn't make sense to me. One of your justifications for the electors basically overturning the results of the election was this. You said the winner-take-all rule for allocating Electoral College votes, which is not required by the Constitution, radically skews the voting power of citizens based simply upon where they live. That fact, you said, did not exist or was not apparent on November 8th. And I guess my point would be it was apparent on November 8th, and both campaigns knew the rules, and Hillary spent over $1 billion trying to win according to those rules. So why would we call that unfair?
Well, what wasn't apparent, because this is an idea that now has become quite pressing, is that this system conflicts with a more fundamental principle of winner-take-all, of one person, one vote. And it's that idea which I think would lead some people to say, you know, what the heck, we've only had this happen twice before, that the winner of the popular election was not the winner in the Electoral College. And why should that be the precedent that should determine who the president should be?
Right. I understand that. But it does seem like maybe that's a conversation we would have before the election, before, you know, 62 million people voted for Donald Trump.
Sure.
It does seem basically unfair to change the rules after it's over.
Yeah, so the point that we're making is just simply that these electors have a constitutional power granted by the framers. This was their vision to make a judgment about whether to confirm the results that would come from whatever this process is. And that judgment needs to be made in light of what they know right now. And I think the important point we're just trying to advance, I'm not trying to persuade anybody of anything, we're just trying to advance the idea that they are free to make that judgment based on what they believe.
Well, actually, you go on to try to persuade people to vote a certain way. You say, and I'm quoting now, you say there's a strong argument, a correct argument, I believe, that if an elector cannot vote for the candidate to whom she is pledged, she ought to vote for the next best candidate. That candidate clearly is Hillary Clinton in every state. And it is my view that if an elector is unable to support Trump, she has an ethical obligation to vote for Clinton. Now, that's not really constitutional analysis. That's advocacy. That's not really a legal argument, is it?
No, of course it is, because what the Supreme Court said in Ray versus Blair was that states can't force electors to vote one way or another, but they can create a moral obligation for them to vote one way or the other. And what I was saying in that piece, the piece you so kindly said you thought, at least in some parts, was smart, was that there is, in the ethical analysis, a very strong presumption in favor of voting for the person you pledged. And that's what I believe all these electors have. And the only question is, does something override that? And I agree that you might say that the equal protection argument is new and that shouldn't override it. But the real issues that are of concern to Republicans, I think, from what I've heard from people speaking to them, are the issues about the unwillingness to give up the conflicts, to violate the foreign bribery clause, or the issues of the Russian election. These are issues that should weigh on the conscience of an elector and lead the elector to ask, does it make sense for me to vote as I'm pledged, or do I have an obligation because of my conscience to vote for another Republican?
Right. I mean, I think those are real issues, the foreign conflict one especially, and that may be resolved when the president-elect addresses it at a press conference in coming days. But my question to you, just as an American and someone who's paying close attention to the country, what do you think would happen if a group of 538 people basically nullified the results of an election in which over 100 million people participated? Wouldn't that be evidence, in fact, wouldn't that be conclusive evidence this is really an oligarchy and not a democracy? And wouldn't that cause chaos? I mean, it would, right?
Well, I don't think it would cause chaos, because what this would do would send it to the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives would then have to choose. And of course, there are a significant majority of Republican states in the House of Representatives, 1 vote per state. So I don't think the result would result necessarily in not a Republican being elected, maybe even not Donald Trump being elected. But the real point is this process is what the framers gave us. You don't like what the framers gave us, I get it. Let's amend the Constitution. But this process, where they would have the right to make this independent, nonpartisan judgment, is what we've inherited here, right? Now, I understand the anxiety here, but look, let's go back to 2000. One justice of the Supreme Court stopped a process so that the person who won the majority vote didn't even have a chance to see whether, in fact, he also should have won Florida. There wasn't a riot because of that, right? There wasn't the end of democracy. Here, the only thing that we're talking about is the process that the framers gave us to say these people have a judgment they need to make. And I think we ought to let them make that judgment without threats from Donald Trump or without a process that makes them seem like they're supposed to be just cogs in a wheel.
Right.
They are officers. They're people. You got to go.
Mr. Lessig, our satellite's going down from Reykjavik. Thanks a lot for that. I appreciate it.